And I thank Saiba very much for having me over here for me to reveal my three mistakes on this podium. So me being an oculoplasty specialist, I would be discussing my perspective of the cases that I have encountered. Since making mistakes is better than faking perfection, I would be confessing to the ones that I have made here. The most valuable thing you can make is a mistake, it's said. And why is that so? Because we never learn anything from perfection. We only learn from our mistakes. So my first mistake is something that probably all of us would have done at some point of time in my life, in your lives. I was tired of my tresses, and one fine day I decided to go short. And oops, I was extremely disappointed with the outcome. So it often happens, which I call this a pendulum mistake, that we go from one end to another to correct what we are not happy with. So my first patient was this kid with left eye ptosis who wanted correction only of his left eye. His Herring's test was positive, so I had counseled him preoperatively that probably after correction he would need a right eye surgery. But he was unprepared and unwilling for any intervention in his right eye. Since this was my second case, my first case was an undercorrection, so over enthusiastically I overcorrected his left eye and it's looking extremely scary. He was startled by this and extremely unhappy, a patient post-operatively. This is how it looked after orbicularis exercise and eyelash traction, which are conservative measures which I chose to opt for earlier before intervening again. The options I was left with now, since he refused any right eye surgery, was Muller's muscle excision, which are the options for eyelid retraction correction, levator recession, wherein you can see in this second image, the levator is recessed from its attachment to the tarsus, hyaluronic acid filler in the upper eyelid. In cases of undercorrection, it can be instilled more or adjusted according, and in cases of overcorrection, you can use hyaluronidase to reduce the amount of droop. But this would definitely cost the patient quite a bit. And the last option would have been anterior blepharotomy, which would have been more invasive. I would probably show a short video over here, which I could have done. I discussed. So this procedure involves incision along the lid crease, separation of the skin and the orbicularis. We then encounter the orbital septum. This is just to understand the eyelid anatomy. And after incision on the orbital septum, we come across the preaponeurotic fat pad, which is then retracted, and then you come across the levator, which I could have recessed and placed at a higher level with 360 Prolene mattress sutures. Then taken eyelid crease forming sutures, because for forming, the levator has fibers which go onto the eyelid crease, which would be needed to be formed for a symmetrical appearance. And then close the wound with a 6-Prolene suture, which is taken out at a week's time. Luckily for me, the patient was willing eventually agreed for his right eye surgery, as he realized that there was a droop, as you can notice, in the right eye after the left eye correction. And eventually I had this outcome, which was satisfactory not only to me, but the patient as well. What I learned from this is overcorrection is the swing of pendulum from one side of action to another. And even if we are unsatisfied with our previous outcome, we should still think in moderation and not try to overdo what we think would probably provide a better outcome. My second mistake is something that we all probably do sometime, regret giving up on something in our lives too soon. For me, it was my hobby, which was basketball, which I stopped playing after I joined my medical college. And I said, I can't do it, I don't have time. Likewise, I gave up on one of my patients who came up with an orbital inflammatory disease with a right eye mild proptosis and severe congestion in the inferior orbit. She had a lesion in the fornix, which involved around the inferior rectus muscle. Her CT scan orbit showed a lesion involving the inferior rectus insertion as well as a mass behind the globe, as you can see in this image. So we chose an incision biopsy due to an unusual presentation, and which revealed on histopathological examination an IgG4 to IgG level of more than 0.4, although her serum IgG was about 115. Since we consider histopathological diagnosis as the clinching diagnosis, we started her on oral steroids, consulted our rheumatologist, and started her on azathioprine along with oral steroids. Initially, she did show good amount of improvement, but we lost her to follow-up for 4 months. I did try calling her up, but she was not reachable. The phone number provided was not correct. And somehow I forgot about this patient, got busy with the other patients in my life. Eventually, she came back. Since she also had a cataract in this eye, she did not realize the worsening on her own till someone brought it to her notice that her proptosis has worsened. Got an imaging done, and this time there was a huge mass involving the orbit, which was much lesser as compared to this previous scan. Got a B scan done because the cataract was sufficiently dense, which showed an exudative retinal detachment. Now that got us thinking that it is probably an infective etiology, and our immunosuppressants have probably caused the focus of infection to rise to enormous proportions. Her B scan showed an exudative retinal detachment inferiorly, and then on further investigation, one second, on literature search, it showed that we need 3 things for diagnosis of IgG4 related disease. It has to have an organ involvement, serum IgG levels of more than 135 mg%, as well as histopathological diagnosis, which tells you that IgG4 and IgG ratio should be more than 4. And the levels of the number of cells per high power field should be more than 10 having IgG4. That is a definitive diagnosis. Organ-specific criteria like Mikulicz syndrome disease are also involved in definite diagnosis. Probable diagnosis is where there is organ involvement. Serum IgG levels are less than 135, as was in our case. But histopathology shows you that IgG4 to IgG ratio is more, and more than 10 IgG4 positive cells per high power field. So ours fitted into the criteria which showed, which was probable diagnosis and not a definite diagnosis. We got her evaluated further, which showed raised serum ESR and raised CRP, and Mantoux test was strongly positive. Her chest X-ray showed reticular shadows, and we started her on orbital tuberculosis with AKT and steroids, with the diagnosis of orbital tuberculosis. The Western literature does not give a differential of orbital IgG4, includes just lymphoma and malignancies. But in Indian scenario, we have to take into consideration orbital tuberculosis, although it's not a very common finding. With this treatment, after 9 months, her B scan showed resolution of her detachment, and now she's planned for a cataract surgery. So what I learned from this was follow up your patient no matter what. And even if the specialty does not completely involve your subject or limited to what you practice, stay updated with interspecialty literature. My third mistake is probably just Valentine's Day has gone by 2 days ago, and we think of such pleasant times with whosoever we go on a date with. But not always it goes well, and we sometimes end up with something much less present. So in such cases, should we or should we not deviate from our plan? Rather, the surgical plan from a surgeon's point of view. So here was a patient who was a 60-year-old male who presented with a painless mass in the left upper eyelid with no other significant complaints. On elevation of the eyelid, it showed a vascular lesion which was well defined, but not very well encapsulated. On imaging studies, the T1 weighted MRI showed an iso-intense lesion, which you can see on your left side, which was well circumscribed. T2 weighted MRI showed a heterogeneous lesion, which was centrally hyperintense, and it was compressing the globe a little bit. And post-contrast enhancement showed moderate heterogeneous contrast enhancement. So clinical radiological diagnosis of hemangiopericytoma or solitary fibrous tumor was made. Considering the vascularity, the interventional radiologist advised a digital subtraction angiography. And as you can see, the tumor blush of the ophthalmic artery has the branch of external carotid, which was supplying the tumor, has been embolized. And we decided to take up the patient for surgery. Intraoperatively, although, the mass was pretty firm. And we chose to excise it completely in toto because it involved, it was encasing the inferior rectus, and since it was an SFT, it could have recurred again, and we excised it completely, sacrificing the superior rectus and the LPS complex. But to our surprise, on histopathological examination, it showed that the CD20 was positive, which is suggestive of lymphoid cell, and CD34, which is prerequisite on immunohistochemistry for a diagnosis of SFT, was negative. Post-operatively, we realized that patient, obviously, since we have sacrificed the superior rectus, elevation was limited and patient had diplopia. So what I learned from this, could we have changed the intraoperative plan to an incision biopsy since we had already embolized the mass and we were not sure, just it was a clinical radiological diagnosis and not a pathological diagnosis. We could have probably just done an incision biopsy and followed up patient later for lymphoma with radiotherapy, and we would not have suffered what the patient suffered eventually. So to conclude, it's just good to learn from your mistakes like we are learning, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. I have done these mistakes, so hopefully none of these will be repeated by those who are witnessing this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Akriti.